What's up, everybody? I'm going to start off with some lightweight stuff here, so if you want, go ahead and skip forward. If you're new around here, you might want to listen to this part, but since YouTube has stopped recommending my videos to new viewers, there's probably not very many of you that are new. So, you guys know how they've got all the Hollywood freak parties? Well, that kind of went mainstream in the 17th century with a Mr. Safi that we'll get to in a minute, but that kind of depravity dates back to the antediluvian world. Eustace Mullins writes the book of Zohar stresses the Talmudic legend that demons originated in actual congress between humans and demonic powers. This offers a reasonable explanation as to why all occult ceremonies stress the three things: drugs, incantations, and bizarre actual practices. Then he lists these unspeakable things that crop up again and again in our history and say that these phenomena bear little to no relation to mankind's day to day routine of tilling the soil, raising families, and maintaining the standards of civilization. On the contrary, these calamities are direct assaults on the normal existence of humanity. Going all the way back to ancient Egypt, Pharaoh Memepta set up a stela to commemorate his success, saying, "Plundered is the Canaan. With every evil, all lands are united and pacified." This, of course, didn't mean that he had used every evil conceivable. It meant that he had encountered every evil practiced by this tribe. And the way he puts it, it sounds like they were the ones causing all the trouble because get rid of the troublemakers and all the lands are united and pacified. Now, he refers to the people of Shem basically as the good guys in history, referring to the three sons of Noah. And for some reason, it was Ham that, quote, saw Noah's nakedness, but Noah cursed Canaan, his son. No explanation why. But the people of Shem have been systematically reviled and concealed throughout the records of history because of his thoroughly degenerate nephew Canaan, who was so wicked that his last will and testament to his children was a formula for vice. It read, "Love one another, that is, of this tribe only, love robbery, love lewdness, hate your masters, and do not speak the truth." Now, just think about that for a second. What if you had a group of people that you all agreed to not have any moral compunction whatever towards outsiders, where it's a good thing to lie about your identity, convert to different religions, and tell them whatever they want to hear, and everybody in your group is in on it, and you all know you're just waiting for the first opportunity to take advantage of these suckers in any way that you can without getting caught. Well, that seems to be the case, and unfortunately, it gives a whole group of people a bad name because most people do lump all the descendants of the tribe together and do not realize that there was a tainted branch, who Mullins refers to here as the cursed Shalanites. And it's these cursed Shalanites that are the true Canaanites that carry on the will of Canaan. Now, they did all of this in secret, apparently, up until about 1600s when Shabbatai V came along. If you've never heard of him, you should really look into him because I'm just giving you the G-rated version here, but not a good dude at all. I don't think that he was the first to initiate this inversion of morality, and everybody sees this in today's world where good is bad, bad is good, but he took that from the shadows and made it mainstream. He amassed a huge following that saw him as the Messiah, and he is famously bipolar, had some screws loose. There's one story of him pushing a baby carriage around town with a fish in it because of a certain interpretation that he made. But according to him, committing sinful acts was simply doing the left hand work of God, to the point where even if you violate a pre-adult person, it's okay because that's what God wanted to happen anyway. So he basically promoted every debauchery you can think of, saying that, well, the more corrupt this world is, then the faster God will come. So let's do it. And, I always try to be fair and point out that only a small percentage of people today are into this kind of insanity. But in the 17th century, half of the world's gray population went along with this idea that salvation was available through acts of sin. So it's not a good look, but to be fair, the traditional orthodoxy excommunicated him. But like I said, a lot of people were down with this, so his movement spread to Venice, Amsterdam, Hamburg, London, and several other European and North African cities. Now, I've heard lectures on this, how basically it spread everywhere overnight like wildfire. But with Christianity, they act like it took 1,000 years for the word of Jesus to make it up to Britain. The world was pretty much exactly the same at those two different times. I mean, their ships were better, but they still had sailing ships back in the day. Anyway, people were literally falling into trances on the street and prophesizing, saying that world salvation, which is actually all other nations becoming subservient to the special people, was to come through a bloodless victory of Shabbatai riding on a lion with a 7-headed dragon in his jaws. And of course, the apocalyptic year was 1666. But what they're describing here is the Gnostic idea of Yaldabaoth, the demiurge, the evil creator god. And it really makes me wonder how many people see the god of this world as a malevolent spirit and worship him anyway. Because that's what they want: the money, fame, power, all of the things of this world. And apparently, a tight knit group can accomplish a lot in this world. That's why it's been an age old struggle to divide the rest of us. Meanwhile, all the wealth and resources has gathered into the hands of a very few. The oligarchy is just their natural state of governance. Like the old saying goes, he who has the gold makes the rules, the golden rule. While all of us suckers thought it was do unto others as you would have them do unto you. We're just idealistic and naive, apparently. But Mr. Svi amassed a following of 1 million people spread all across all these cities. He was either incarcerated or banished from almost every city that he visited, and eventually his license to breathe was revoked. But a lot of people still love this idea of the more you sin, the better it is. Then in the 1700s, a man named Jacob Frank took up the cause of the golden condom, and he and his followers started trying to bugger their way to heaven. So all of this Easting Diddy stuff is nothing new. They've been doing this for hundreds of years. They used to do it out in the open. Frank told his fellow degenerates, "I came not to elevate your spirits, but to humiliate you to the bottom of the abyss, where you can get no lower, and where no man can rise from by his own forces, but only God can pull him with his mighty hand from the depth." You know, I've been trying to think of a name for these degenerates for the longest time, and pretty much the Defilers is the name that I have in the back of my head, because that's what they do. They defile anything that any decent society would hold as sacred. They don't produce anything, they don't contribute anything to society, and they're completely uninnovative. Whenever they want to go after somebody, it's always the same thing. Oh, he touched his secretary. When you're that demented, you think that everybody else is as screwed up as you. It's like the person that always claims the other partner is cheating on them when they're the ones that are cheating. Or someone that always thinks everybody is lying because they themselves always lie. So it's that kind of mentality that Frank brought to the table, and he wound up in Frankfurt at the same time as Mayor Redshield. And it's speculated that them and Weishaupt, who is an ex-Jesuit, started a little club of illuminated ones. And it is said that the objectives of this organization was to undermine the world's religions and power structures in an effort to usher in a utopian era of global Amu-Kizame, covertly ruled by their hidden hand. Now, by utopian, they don't mean for everybody. They mean utopian as in they own everything and make all the decisions and you're just the chattel. And this is what happened 100 years ago in, I'll just say, Tartaria. It's right there on the screen. Everybody wonders what happened to actual Tartaria. This is it. I should do a video about that. And I'm not talking about some magical stone gnomes that went around the world and built everything and disappeared. These were actual people, millions and millions of them, that Alexander Solzhenitsyn documented in graphic detail. And he says the fact that most of the world is ignorant and uncaring about this enormous crime is proof that the global media is in the hands of the perpetrators. Now, there are several layers to all of this, and I'm trying to present it in the order that will work best. But you had all of these people with an absolutely corrupt ideology living in pockets in all of these cities around the world. And then when they'd get caught up in things, they would flee and run to basically the home base. If you rewind a few hundred years before all of the events in this video I've discussed, the KM had already turned this whole area into a stronghold for themselves. The traditional nobility still officially controlled this area all the way up until Dub Dub Deuce, but they had actually handed over control of all the financial affairs to the KM here, which is, of course, modern-day Ukraine. So, when people would get caught up in all these cities all around the world and have to flee, they would go back to this area where they just erased all of the men from this country in the last few years. It never was about going up into Ruskovia. It was about getting rid of all of the men that lived there, while idiots on Twitter fly their flag and unwittingly root for the G side of the people that actually live there. So when you hear about Dub Dub Deuce and the German Z's going into this area, you're actually picking up the end of the story, not the beginning. But that's a discussion for another day. So now when you see this inversion of morality and the defilement of decent society, you know that there was a group a few hundred years ago that openly celebrated all of this. And they didn't disappear, they just went back underground, but you still hear about their parties and all these things that they do all the time. Weren't there a bunch of tunnels underneath a building in New York not too long ago? And, you know, the stories about this go back for hundreds of years, but of course those are all just conspiracies because they control all of the information outlets. Anyway, coming up soon will be how they took control of Poland and used that as a launching point to put the world in the state that it is today and continuing on into Static out.